And now I have the honor of giving the floor to Dr. Adnan RAHMAN. For the past 5 years, Dr. Adnan RAHMAN has been working on developing a national transport model and master plan for Ukraine. Since 2022, he has been actively involved in planning the recovery and reconstruction of the transport sector in Ukraine. Mr. Adnan is currently the managing director of DATS Consulting. His areas of expertise include policy, strategy analysis, organization decision support systems, transport planning issues related to sustainability, and others. The topic of Dr. Adnan RAHMAN's speech, using ITC for Build Back Better. Dear Adnan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olga. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's an honor to be invited to talk at this conference. I appreciate it. Thank you for that. It's a pity that I cannot be there in person, and hopefully we will be able to meet in the future once this war is over. Today I'm going to talk about building back better. Ukraine has suffered terribly, and its transportation sector networks have suffered terribly as a result of this war. We're going to talk about how, in all this darkness, there's also an opportunity to build back better. And I'm going to talk about how ITS could be the backbone for building back more resilient and efficient transport networks. So Ukraine's transport network has been very heavily impacted by the war. We all know that. We can see that. Like I said, this also presents an opportunity. And the focus of building back better has to be on resilience, efficiency, and user-centered design. While the damage has been very widespread to the transport infrastructure, the roads, rail, ports, aviation has been completely shut down. We all know that. The resources that are available. Yes.
I'm really sorry. As I know you have presentation. Yes. Maybe you don't share it. Your presentation.
I can share it. Sorry, I
yes,
thought you. Excuse me. Just give me 1 minute. Let's see. How do you share this? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
You see? Excellent. So, although the damage has been extensive, the resources for building back better are limited. And these resources, even if we are able to bring the private sector to invest in the transport sector in Ukraine, will still be limited. Also, one needs to protect against future conflicts and natural disasters, because you're going to have a neighbor, and you have to make sure that your infrastructure is as little vulnerable as possible in the future. And finally, there's a big demand for green and efficient solutions. So what are intelligent transportation systems? Intelligent transportation systems basically integrate technology and data into transport systems in a way that allows you to make decisions almost in real time. I should say that although we have been talking about intelligent transportation systems for a long time, it is only more recently that the advances in computational power that these systems are now becoming reality. So, for example, autonomous vehicles, intelligent traffic lights, intelligent junction management, intelligent network management, mobility on demand, all of these services are becoming reality. The key aspects of this are obviously traffic management systems, onboard systems in vehicles, and systems which integrate the data collection in ways into both the traffic management systems and the vehicle systems to allow decision making. And the benefits are very obvious. It improves safety, it reduces congestion, and it enhances sustainability in a big way. So what is resilience? Resilience has many different meanings. It can be durability, meaning materials that you use. They are resistance to all kinds of damage. Redundancy, this is very important. You have alternative routes, which you can use in case of disruption or attack, in the case of Ukraine, in the case of war. Systems that are able to evolve as technologies change and emerge. And finally, they have an element of risk mitigation. So all of these things can be propagated by the use of ITS technologies in intelligent ways. Efficiency, basically ITS allows you to minimize delays. It also allows you to minimize waste and energy consumption. And at the same time, it maximizes connectivity and throughput. I'll give you an example of this. Many, many years ago, in the city of Lisbon, I was fortunate enough to be involved in a test of how mobility on demand would work and whether it would be able to provide the same level of connectivity and accessibility throughout the city as the bus service. Even though it was a very limited pilot, what we found was astonishing. By putting in place mobility on demand services, we were able to provide at the same level better connectivity and mobility services than the scheduled bus service system in Lisbon by a factor of almost 30 to 40%. The efficiency considerations are not trivial. They can alleviate congested infrastructure in ways that are difficult actually to even imagine sometimes. And I'll give you some examples of this later. And also what is very important is the user-centered design. And user-centric transport, it focuses on the users of the transport infrastructure rather than meeting the needs of vehicles. And this is very important. And this allows for people, more and more people to use transportation services rather than having private cars, for example. It improves accessibility, it enhances safety, and very important, and this affects the use of transport services as well, particularly public transport services, comfort and convenience. So ITS offers several opportunities for Ukraine. The first very important one is, given the limited and constrained resource environment, is the efficient allocation of resources. You can do real-time monitoring, for example, to prioritize the best. It allows you to build systems which are resilient. It promotes sustainability by enhancing efficiency. And finally, and this is going to be very important for Ukraine going forward, it can be a driver for economic growth. Ukraine is quite strong in the area of software development. Software is one of the key elements of ITS. The algorithms which are used in ITS applications are very important. So ITS presents a big opportunity in reconstructing the transport sector in Ukraine. Let me give you a few examples. Here is how you can manage networks using real-time data. Currently, most of the data that is used to manage networks comes from sensors which are installed in the network or some kind of cameras which are installed in the network. But you can also use data from sensors which are actually installed in most vehicles today. Given this, you can identify bottlenecks, you can identify, and you combine all this data into one comprehensive database, and I'm showing you pictures of a network in a city where this is being done in real time, more or less. So you can, in fact, predict congestion ahead of time, so short-time prediction, which allows you to provide information to drivers which remove the bottlenecks before they actually occur. You can respond to incidences. If something happens, you can immediately detect it and respond to it. So ITS is a very powerful tool for managing networks in urban environments, but not just in urban environments. also in metropolitan areas, even nationally, I would say. The very important element, particularly for Ukraine, is corridor management of freight transport as you reorient your freight flows towards the west and towards the European Union. This is an example of incident management using real-time data. So typically we have to wait till somebody calls 112 or an emergency number and reports an accident. But with the sensors which are currently installed in vehicles, you can detect an accident before it has even been reported. This system actually has been implemented in many vehicles. There's the Ecology system in Europe, in the European Union. And this is another example of how Ukraine can leapfrog. We have travel demand management using kilometer pricing. Now, you have all heard of cordon pricing and congestion charging, for example, in cities like London and Oslo. But all of these, in fact, are very limited applications of pricing and travel demand management using price. Kilometer pricing is a concept which would replace completely all the taxes which we currently pay using roads. When you buy a car, typically, for example, in European Union member states, you pay a tax, a road tax. You also pay a tax on fuel. Now, instead of that, you pay for the distance which you drive. And this system would cover both freight and passenger vehicles. You can create a system in which you charge per kilometer based on the time of day, based on the location of the vehicle in the network, and based on the technology in the vehicle that is using the network. So it allows you, for example, to deal with issues of congestion. You can increase the price where capacity is limited or scarce, or where there's congestion. You can induce people to drive more using better, more efficient technology in their car. So people with cleaner engines, cleaner vehicles pay less per kilometer than people otherwise. It allows you to directly incorporate the external costs of driving. And also certain hours of the day, which are peak hours, you can increase the tariff. You can promote or stimulate mode shift using price. All the technology for implementing such a system is there. We have the satellite systems, we have the GPS systems, we have the wireless communication systems, we have even onboard vehicle units, which would very easily be able to do what is required in the system. So this is an example of an application of ITS technologies in a way which would be quite innovative. While we have talked about kilometer pricing in several countries, and we've talked about it for many years, including in the Netherlands, I was involved in this debate for many, many years. Somehow we have never been able to implement it, and maybe Ukraine can show the way. Why not? So ITS really offers several opportunities to literally transform the Ukrainian transport system. The key to bringing about this transformation is going to be collaboration, innovation, and sustainability. And if you are able to create such a resilient transport network, it can be the backbone driving Ukrainian recovery and growth, which is going to be crucial to Ukrainian success in the coming years. Of course, the $60 million question is, how do we get to the point where these innovations that I've just shared with you are developed regularly in the future, not just what I've shown you, but there are, I'm sure, many more innovations, and more importantly, that these get implemented. So I want to share with you a very brief framework. In this triangle at the top, you have the government, and then you have consumers and industry. These are the three major groups in society. And they're driven by their beliefs. So, for example, governments these days think that sustainability is good, or they think that the internalization of external costs is a good way to regulate markets. Then you have attitudes. Consumers have attitudes toward certain technologies. So, for example, certain consumers like public transport, others don't. In the US, public transport use is very limited compared to Europe. And finally, you have values. And these three things create a belief system, and they are at the center of this triangle. Governments have them, consumers have them, and industry has them. The interaction between government and industry is regulated by all kinds of regulation and legislation. The interaction between industry and consumers is carried out through markets. And the interaction between government and consumers takes place by an expression of societal preferences that then get expressed into policy. Technology really is one of the drivers of regulation. Globalization and competition drive markets, and nature and politics drive societal preferences. So why are we not seeing more innovation in the transport sector? All the things that I've shown you and shared with you, the technology for implementing these products and much more, that. But we don't seem to be able to connect the dots. And the reason, I think, is that innovation is much more than technology and markets. It's about values, it's about beliefs, it is about societal preferences. It's about creating new knowledge to change how we look at the world, how we interact with the world. And I would say that currently we are inventing and not innovating. And we are doing this because we are not really focused on how to change our interaction with the world. A good example is Tesla. Even though I'm not sure I'm very fond of the man behind Tesla, it is a good example of how he has recreated the market for automobiles. And this is what is needed in a way, much more. So I will leave you to think about that. And if you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Adnan, thank you. If somebody have question, please. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Natalia, please switch on the microphone and ask.
Dear Adnan, thank you for your study. And will you be so kind just to sum up and to share some general ideas about how can we develop such infrastructure that will be able to withstand the existing threats today? As you mentioned, I remember that we have to take into account the social life, the authorities' decision, political system, etc. But can you just sum up and share some general ideas? How can we organize such an infrastructure?
So one of the key things that this war has shown is the vulnerability of centralized infrastructure. And I take the case of ports, for example. At the start of the war, the Russians blockaded the Black Sea ports and the ports on the Sea of Azov. They'd already done that by building the bridge on the Kerch Strait. The Ukrainian response to this was fantastic. They built platforms for moving freight using inland waterways and for moving freight by sea to Romanian ports of Constanța and another one which I currently forget. So what they did is they decentralized the shipment of freight instead of having it go through these big ports of Odessa and Pivdeni and Chernomorsk or Mariupol or whatever, Berdyansk before the war. They now started moving to inland waterways and using the inland waterways. It became harder for the Russians to hit this because there were many more places. There was no concentration of the freight. So and you also see this with energy generation. The centralized power plants and transformer stations, they have been hit by the Russians. But if you decentralize power generation and have micro generation, it becomes much harder to destroy the energy system or the transport system. Now, I would say the same thing for transportation. What intelligent transport systems allow you to do is to decentralize the supply of transport. So instead of having big hubs where rail hubs, even, for example, of course, that's slightly more difficult to decentralize. Using ITS technology, you can manage supply to demand. For example, for moving freight by road, you can shift a lot of freight to trucks. You can, instead of having large distribution centers, you can distribute them and make them smaller, making your entire distribution system more resilient. The same holds for shipping. So this is one example off the top of my head of how I think you could go about doing this. On the other hand, you could also, in cities, for example, instead of having metro systems, of course, have served a very useful purpose during the war, but you could also meet demand using mobility on demand services. And you already have that, for example, with Uber or Bolt. All of these are examples, but you could take this concept even further and do it in a much more bigger and organized way throughout the country, for example. So those are just some of the examples that came to mind.
Thank you. Please, Victor, you also want to ask, but you need to switch on the microphone.
Thank you very much for a very interesting report. Your Build Back Better concept is fully consistent with Ukraine's post-war reconstruction goals, where intelligent transport systems can offer powerful foundation for creating effective transport system, transport infrastructure. But in Ukraine to date, there is no strategy plan program for development and implementation of intelligent transport system. Today in Ukraine, there is no system of standard for main indicators, protocols for information, telecommunication, telematic, and transport components, which integrated in the core of intelligent transport systems. It's very important for us, your opinion, have in practical ways we can realize this problem using your practice or a practice of the leading countries, for example, European Union. Thank you.
So I think that there are two things that I could mention. One is, I think you've already pointed out that there's no plan for ITS. And as I understand it, the Ministry of Exploration is currently working on a national transport strategy and updating it, and I believe it will become available in December. The revised National Transport Strategy to 2030. I think that ITS needs to be part of that strategy, to be quite honest. What I have seen of the strategy, I'm not sure it was extensively part of it. But I also think it would be important to develop a national strategic plan for intelligent transportation systems in the transport sector. And I think actually this is not that hard to do, but I think this blueprint is necessary. The second thing, which I think is quite important, is to attract private sector players. You have a strong software industry. I think the software industry should be involved in the development of ITS technology. Not necessarily only for use in Ukraine, but you can export it as well. But having a hub of people, a core group of people working in this area will stimulate, I think, innovation in the transport sector and in the application of technology in Ukraine. So I think attracting industry is important, and having a blueprint is very important. And having that blueprint incorporated in a national transport strategy, an official recognition that the future of transport will have ITS at its heart is important. This is one way. The alternative could be you take something like kilometer pricing and implement it in Ukraine and lobby the government, lobby the European partners. I'm quite confident the European Union will support this because this is completely in line with their thinking about internalization of external costs of transport. You can include climate, you can include congestion, you can include the technology in your car, you can include all kinds of different factors based on which you differentiate the charge that you levy on the users of your network. No country in Europe has this yet. They have implemented a toll or a kilometer kind of charge for heavy goods vehicles. I forget the exact directive which implemented it, but I am suggesting this to all of Ukraine. If you do this, it will kickstart ITS in a way that few things could.